Welcome to The Explainer, where we dig into the data to make sense of the world. Today, we're looking at something you see all over the globe, smoking among men. But as you're about to see, where you are in the world makes a huge, huge difference. So, how common is it really? You might think there's a simple answer, but nope. The reality is, it's complicated. And diving into the numbers reveals some truly fascinating and, honestly, pretty startling global patterns about where smoking is the absolute norm versus where it's the exception. Okay, so here's our game plan for this explainer. We'll start with the big picture, then we'll zero in on the real hotspots. After that, we'll see where smoking is super rare, check out where the global powers fit into all this, and then, wrap it all up with what this data really tells us. All right, first up, let's get our bearings. The data we're looking at comes straight from the World Health Organization, and it shows the percentage of men who smoke in countries all over the world. And let me tell you, the differences are, well, they're not just big, they're absolutely staggering.
So, let's just jump right to the extreme end of the scale, shall we? We're about to pinpoint the countries with the absolute highest concentration of male smokers.
And I really want to stress this. We're not just talking about a few percentage points here and there. In some nations, smoking is so widespread that it's just the norm. It's the overwhelming majority, not the exception. Just look at this number, 70.5%. Let that sink in for a second. That's more than 7 out of every 10 men. 7! And the country with this incredibly high rate, it's Indonesia. That is the highest on our list. Wow. And get this, Indonesia isn't some lone outlier. If you look at this table, the top 3 spots are all in the same neighborhood, basically. You've got Indonesia, Myanmar, and Bangladesh, all in South and Southeast Asia, with rates floating between 60 and 70%. It's undeniable. This region is a major global hotspot for male smoking.
Okay, so that's the high end, a world where more than 2/3 of men smoke. But what about the other side of the coin? Let's flip the script and explore the nations at the complete opposite end of the spectrum.
This chart right here does an amazing job of showing just how huge the global gap is. Look at that. On one end, you have Indonesia, way up over 70%. Then in the middle, you've got a country like the US sitting at about 31%. And then all the way on the other side, you see Sweden, where the rate just plummets to a mere 6%. The difference is just enormous. It's like they're on different planets.
So yeah, Sweden is in this kind of exclusive club, we could call it the sub 10% club, where fewer than 1 in 10 men smoke. But what's really interesting is who else is in that club. You've got Ethiopia, Nigeria. This shows that these super low rates aren't confined to just one part of the world. You see them from Scandinavia all the way to Africa.
All right, so we've seen the extremes, the highs and the lows. But what about everyone in between? Where do the world's major economies and other big players fit into this picture? Because let me tell you, the patterns here are just as revealing.
Yeah, it turns out a whole bunch of countries, including a lot of the developed nations in Europe and the Americas, land somewhere in this middle range. We're talking about places where maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 men smoke. So it's not super rare, but it's not the overwhelming norm either. Think of it as the 25 to 40% zone.
Now, this is interesting. When you look at the major global economies, you see some really curious groupings. China is a huge outlier, with a rate of almost 48%. That's nearly 1 in 2 men. Russia is also way up there at 41%. And then you see this other cluster, countries like the US, Germany, even Japan, all hanging out closer together in that 30% range. And this is where it gets really fun, because the patterns are not at all what you might expect. I mean, look at this. You've got France and Japan, 2 countries you couldn't imagine being more different culturally, and yet their smoking rates are almost identical. Same thing with the UAE and Saudi Arabia. It just goes to show you that your typical assumptions about region or economy, they don't always work here.
Okay, so we've taken a trip around the world, from the smoking hotspots of Southeast Asia to the super low rates in Scandinavia. After looking at all of these numbers, what's the big takeaway? What does this all really reveal?
Well, it really boils down to 3 key things. First, the difference from country to country is just massive. I mean, from over 70% down to under 10%, that's a huge gap. Second, Southeast Asia is clearly, without a doubt, a global hotspot. And third, you can't just guess a country's smoking rate based on its wealth or where it is on a map. The data's full of surprises. At the end of the day, these numbers, There's so much more than just statistics on a page, right? They're really a reflection of a country's culture, its daily norms. They tell a story about public health policies, what's working and what isn't, and of course, they show the impact of the tobacco industry. Each one of these percentages is the final result of all these powerful, competing forces.
And all of this leaves us with one big final thought to chew on. We've seen the what, we've seen the shocking difference between a country where 7 out of 10 men smoke and one where it's barely 1 in 10. But the really big question this data makes you ask is why? What are the cultural, the economic, the political factors behind the scenes that create such wildly different worlds?